This is Dorie Clark, and we're here for another weekly edition of Better, which is a Newsweek live stream interview show about ways that you can improve your career and your life. And this week, we're here with Roger Martin. He is the author of the new book, A New Way to Think. And we're going to be talking about how to maximize your effectiveness as a professional and as a leader. Roger, it's fantastic to have you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dorie. I always like talking to you.
Thank you so much. And welcome to all the friends who are tuning in from around the world. If you are joining us here, please type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you are dialing in from. We'd love to see who you are. And please feel free to ask your questions for Roger Martin in the chat box. Roger is the former dean and an emeritus professor at the Rotman School at the University of Toronto and a well-known business thinker. So we're very excited to have the opportunity to tap his wisdom. So Roger, my first question, I've been enjoying reading A New Way to Think. And one of the assertions that you make in the book, kind of the central theme, is that, as humans, as leaders, we all use frames. We all use these kind of heuristics all the time, but a lot of them are wrong. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about why it is we're getting it so wrong. I mean, you articulate well over a dozen different common frames that business leaders use all the time to guide their thinking. And you have come to realize, actually, that's just really not quite right. Why are we screwing up so badly?
I think it is part. And I actually have one chapter on this subject. It's partly our kind of love for familiar things. So we adopt a way of thinking, a frame, a model for thinking about something. Like, it would be a good idea to align the interests of managers and shareholders with the stock-based incentive compensation. And so we get that in our minds as that's the way to think about compensation. And then that becomes the easy, familiar default. And it takes sort of like an extra effort to say, maybe I'm going to change to something different. So we just fall into that pattern. But then when it doesn't work, I think there is this push and pull between the part of you that says, gosh, I wish it were working better, and the part of you that says, well, let's just give it another chance. Maybe we didn't do it, kind of well enough. Maybe we didn't do it hard enough. Maybe we didn't invest enough in it. And so you tell yourself all these stories that give you the sort of the personal permission to keep on using a model that doesn't work. And as I say in the book, there's a time when you just got to look at that model that you're using and say, gee, we've been doing that for almost a half a century, the stock-based compensation. And boy, yep, CEOs have sure done great, absolutely. But it turns out that shareholders haven't done any better. So after 50 years, wouldn't you think maybe you'd say, well, let's just try anything else. But that would break with the pattern of comfort and familiarity. And then a big infrastructure. There's a whole infrastructure of compensation consultants who know how to do that kind of compensation, et cetera. You've got an enabling infrastructure, and instead you've got to step away and say, I'm going to do something different.
I think that's a great point. Yes, so often human nature is aligned against us. The incentives are aligned against us, and we get a little bit trapped in that. I want to explore that further. We're here with Roger Martin. He is talking to us today about his new book, A New Way to Think. And you're here for Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better. I'm Dorie Clark, and we want to say hi to some of the great folks tuning in from around the world. Adrian's here from Michigan. Karen's here from Boston. Jamie from Chicago. Lauren from Maine. Maria from Oakland. Holly from Boston, Gretchen from Pittsburgh, Mohammed from Egypt, Cynthia from LA, Natalie from Wyoming, Bagchan from Nepal, Mebratu from Ethiopia, and many more. We're so glad to have all of you. So, Roger, this reminds me, this is a little bit of like the serenity prayer here. It's like, how do we have the wisdom to know the difference? How can you tell when it's time to double down on a framework, a methodology that you're using because, maybe you actually weren't applying it properly versus the time to jettison it? I mean, you were alluding to things that, okay, it hasn't worked for 50 years. Maybe that seems clear, but I imagine there's a lot of ambiguous situations where it's just not sure, is the frame broken, or am I not doing it right? How can we begin to tease that apart?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a very good question, and what I'd say first and foremost, it's really important when you're using a tool or a framework of any sort to remind yourself what your expectations are of the outcome, and I argue for writing it down, right? Because the human mind has an almost infinite capacity to ex post rationalize. So you can say, oh, we're going to spend 150 million to build that new factory, and we expect sales to be up 50% in 5 years because of that. If you don't write that down, when you get 5 years out and sales are up 35%, you're like, yeah, no, this is perfect. This worked just exactly the way we thought. No, it didn't, but you're ex post rationalizing it. So get more used to, as a leader, writing down what I'm going to do this because of this way I am thinking about it. I expect this result. Put it in the drawer. Just put it away. You don't have to watch it, and then pull it out when the results come out. When the results come out, pull it out so that you can have this kind of objective assessment of, did the model work the way I thought it would? And if the answer is it did, then I'd just say, do it again. If it didn't, right, then I think you have to go into the exploration that you said, Dorie. So I think I would argue for trying it again, right, and saying, here are some things I'm going to do a little bit differently in the way I do it, and then write it down and judge it again. And if it didn't work anywhere nearly the way you predicted it would the second time, I'd say you better have a pretty short leash on that model, right? It's looking bad, and it's probably not going to change a lot. And it's at that point that I would say you should be more confident in saying, let's just try something else. If it were the two of us, Dorie, I'd say, Dorie, I've tried this a couple of times, this methodology for doing it. Do you have any ideas about a better way to think about it? Like, just go and ask people you trust and respect for a different fundamental approach.
That's a great point. Thank you, Roger. We're here with Roger Martin. I'm Dorie Clark for Newsweek, and we're talking with Roger about his new book, A New Way to Think. You can learn more about him and his work. Just go to rogerlmartin.com. And again, the book is A New Way to Think. We want to say hi to some of the amazing folks tuning in and joining us. We've got folks from all over. We have a couple of LinkedIn users. We have someone from St. Paul. We have Chatham, Ontario in the house. Edwin's here from Peru. Constance from Atlanta. Bill from North Carolina, Conchetta from New York. We have Divya from the United Arab Emirates. We have Cristiano from Brazil, Amy from Utah, and Chidima from Nigeria. We're so glad to have all of you. Type your questions for Roger Martin into the chat box.
Especially that Chatham, Ontario. I grew up only about an hour from Chatham, Ontario.
In the house, we get the hometown team rooting for Roger here. That's great. And if you're enjoying this conversation, hit the like button and hit the share button so that your friends and colleagues can benefit from it as well. So, Roger, we've been talking about some of the frames that executives, that leaders get wrong, and I've enjoyed reading your book, but maybe some of the folks who are tuning in here are just being exposed to it for the first time. Can you share with us a couple of examples of some of these frames that you think are some of the most egregious, some of the ones that we perhaps in the business world take for granted the most, that actually turn out not to be all they're cracked up to be? Just so folks can conceptualize a little bit more about what we're talking about.
Sure. Well, I'll use one that'll be fairly controversial, which is over the last, say, 40 or 50 years, everybody who's gone to business school is taught the only kind of decision that's a good decision is one that's based on rigorous data analysis. So it's rigorous data, it's objective, it's analytical. That's the only way to make a good decision. And if you make a decision otherwise, you're some kind of corporate sloth. You're not doing your job seriously, right? Would you agree, Dorie, that's what we're taught?
That's totally the line. Yes.
Yeah. So the problem, there's a sort of a little problem with this, which is that. And I think you'll agree with me on this, Dorie. Last time I checked, all data, as at the time of analysis, 100% of data is in the past. We have no data about the future yet, so it's in the past. And we're also taught, while we're being taught in marketing or finance or accounting to make all your decisions based on data analytics, we're also taught in statistics that the only way to make a legitimate inference from a sample of data, right, is if that sample is representative of the universe we're trying to make an inference about. So if I was trying to figure out, well, what people want in their automobile these days, and I interviewed only men, or only women, or only young consumers, or only old consumers, and then said, well, that's what people want, the statistician would say, you're nuts. You can't sample something so unrepresentative and then draw a general inference. Okay. So if we put those two things together, you need a representative sample, right? And all data is from the past. The only way your data is going to be representative enough to actually do something with it, draw a conclusion from it, is if you are confident the future will be identical to the past. Right?
A little bit risky of a supposition.
I'm sort of thinking that, Dorie. Now, if you're thinking about something like this pen and what happens when I let it go, I think you'd actually be pretty good. It'll drop. It always has dropped, and it'll drop in the future. And so there, doing samples of how fast pens drop is really accurate. But if it were this instead, and you asked, in 1999, how many of these were there around? 0. First one is 2000 BlackBerry. Now they're 4.4 billion. That you wouldn't want a sample from the past to predict what's going to happen in the future. And a smart guy named Aristotle, 2,500 years ago, pointed this out. He said there's two parts of the world. One part of the world is the part where things cannot be other than they are. Okay. There's another part of the world where things can be other than they are. And he invented the scientific method, Aristotle, and warned. He said, use my method, this analytical method for determining the cause of a given effect. That's what he called it. Use it only in this part of the world. And the father of science, the father of data analytics, Aristotle said, never, ever, ever, ever use it in this part of the world. We are taught, use it everywhere. And what's the real problem with the Dorie is that if you analyze the past, right, you are implicitly assuming the future will be identical, and you will not invent the future. Right? What Aristotle said is if you want to invent the future, if you want to be the cause of a new effect, you have to imagine possibilities and choose the one for which the most compelling argument can be made. A very different thing than saying you have to analyze the data so the data tells you what to do. So that would be a model that I would argue is responsible to a great extent for established companies leaving the field entirely open to two kids in a garage disrupting them. Because those two kids in the garage, I can guarantee you, Dorie, are not doing rigorous analysis and saying whatever the analysis tells us we're going to do. They're saying, wouldn't it be great if, right? I was at a dinner with Joe Gebbia, the co-founder of Airbnb, and he was talking through people were at the table were asking him like what went on there, and they imagined a possibility, and then they went and made it happen. And I would argue the world's a better place for it. So I think that model hamstrings innovation and gives people who are outside that model the chance to innovate instead of you. And I think that's unfortunate for the big corporations of today.
That's a really useful point. Thank you so much. We're here with Roger Martin. If you want to learn more about him, check out rogerlmartin.com. His new book is a new way to think. And I'm Dorie Clark. We're here with Better, the weekly Newsweek interview show. We're talking about how to maximize your effectiveness as a professional, as a leader. If you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly episodes, just go to DorieClark.com. You can sign up, get a free self-assessment, and you'll get reminders about these fantastic conversations with leaders. And Roger, what you're describing reminds me of a terrific anecdote that you shared in the book, where you were talking about a company that brought you in. They were frustrated because their innovations seemed to just over time get less and less expansive, less and less impressive. There were these sort of incremental innovations, and it was as you described, for exactly that reason, that their process was based on a rigorous analysis of data, which was completely unable to see the future.
Absolutely, and that's an example. It's sort of why I wrote the book, which is none of these models that are dominant are stupid, right? Like they aren't. Really stupid things rarely catch on. They have some sense to it. Like, isn't it better to be rigorous than not? Absolutely. But there's where you have to, in these models, be a little more nuanced. So Aristotle invented science, right? So he doesn't say science is stupid. He invented it. And that's why he's one of the most important people who've ever lived. But he says you just have to be a little nuanced. Use it here, but don't use it over here. And that's kind of often the case with these models, which is that they get extended to places that the thinkers behind them kind of never imagined them to be taken, or warned against them being taken. And I think that's hopefully a message that comes through with the book is you have, as a leader, right? You have to have this sort of ownership of your models. Don't let them own you because somebody else said this is a great model. Don't just sort of say, oh, okay. What you need to do is really say, how can I have this model do the best for me? And it sometimes is combining pieces of models or saying we can't take that so far. Like another one is on loyalty, right? There's a model that says customer loyalty is the most important thing, the thing that you should worry about. And Fred Reichheld, who has written the book, is a friend of mine, and it is sensible. But what you have to do is kind of recognize as we understand new things, and we understand a lot more about brain science than we did 20 years ago. And I know you know that, Dorie, for sure. But and the brain science it now tells us really that people are driven a heck of a lot more by their subconscious than their conscious. And loyalty is, right, this conscious concept. It's sort of, Dorie used, I don't know, Crest toothpaste for the last 20 years, and her teeth are pearly white, and she doesn't get cavities. And so Dorie is loyal to Crest. And that's not untrue, but it turns out that what's way more important is Dorie's subconscious is saying, Crest, I'm so comfortable with that. It's so familiar to me. It makes me calm and the like. And so kind of, if Dorie's walking down the toothpaste aisle and reaches for a box of Colgate, what we now know from brain science is your subconscious is screaming at you, "Don't do it, Dorie! Don't! This one we're familiar. The Crest one, that one we're comfortable with that. Dorie, what the hell are you doing, reaching for that Colgate box?" So it turns out that the subconscious drives us to a much greater extent than we knew before. And so what that means is a lot of the things that we do from a marketing standpoint, we're going to do a big refresh on the brand. Oh, that logo, the coloring is old fashioned. We're going to do it. What that does is has nothing to do with hurting loyalty, right? And in fact, you can have a huge ad campaign on it's like new Coke, right, or the new Pepsi can, right? We'll teach Dorie's conscious that this is cool, new, and great. Subconscious just says, no, no, forget about it. You're making me nervous. Stop doing that. And so I would argue that a better model is loyalty is not unimportant. The conscious part is not unimportant, but if you ignore habit, you're going to get into trouble. And you know and I'm a bit of a sports fiend, and I have, like everybody else who's a sports fiend, has a sports app on their phone, or their favorite sports app. Mine always was cbssports.com. And I just fell into using it, and it was mine using it. I used it, never thought about using another one until cbssports.com did a big refresh of the site, right? And I'm sure they invested enormously in this refresh to make it fewer clicks and but when the refresh came through, what did my subconscious say? Basically, what the hell is this? I gotta learn a whole new navigation, whole new color schemes. Things that were familiar instantly are no longer even there or familiar. And it caused me, my subconscious annoyance with this caused me to say, I guess it's time to relook at all the sports apps and see which one I'm going to use, right? And guess which is on my homepage now, ESPN.com, right? Which had no chance of getting me if CBS Sports wouldn't have offended deeply my subconscious. But by doing that, it caused me to reassess. And that is what happens when you change. And it's happening with the Great Resignation, Dorie. Like, if you think about it, right, 2 years ago or thereabouts, your employer generally said, we've closed the office. You must now work remotely. And then you did that for 2 years. And what did remotely become after 2 years? My office.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
It's now my office. And when employers said, well, now we seem to be over the pandemic, it's now time to return to the office. What did the subconscious hear?
That was an inflection point, right?
Yes. And it heard, they want me to work remotely. So the new remotely is the old office. And a whole bunch of employees at that point said, wow, do I want to do that entirely new thing, working remotely? Or should I, if you lived in whatever, Greenwich, should I try and get a job here in Greenwich, or should I be a gig person, or should I take 6 months off? And so this Great Resignation can be understood completely as one of ignoring the power of habit. And you do that at your great peril.
Yeah, that's really insightful, Roger. Thank you for sharing that. I say this as someone who spent my childhood drinking way too much Coca-Cola and finally giving it up because I got offended that my college substituted the aluminum cans for plastic cans, which I thought did not keep it cold enough.
Interesting. Yep. So, I'm sure that a big part of that, you couldn't really articulate it all, but you just felt badly about it. And that was your subconscious saying, comfort, familiarity, you just busted it.
That is right. This is a great conversation here with Roger Martin. He is the author of the book, A New Way to Think. You can learn about his book and Roger himself at rogerlmartin.com. And I want to say hi to some of the wonderful friends tuning in from around the world. Aaron is here from Bellevue, Washington. We have Anastasia from Denver, Gwen from DC, Paige from Salt Lake City. We've got Ahmed from Jeddah. We have Janice from Pittsburgh, Chiamba from Angola. We have a LinkedIn user from Pennsylvania. We have Archana from India. We have D from San Diego, Raul from Miami, Katie from Weehawken. We have Yamai from Birmingham, UK. We have Norris from the UK. We have a LinkedIn user from Leon, Mexico. We have Humberto from Monterrey, Mexico, and many more. We're glad to have all of you. And a question, Roger, came in from your pals in Chatham, Ontario. I'm not going to keep it up for long because it's blocking your face, but I will read it to you. And what they are curious about, they are asking, do you think that as we gradually transition through the pandemic, that more senior leaders and managers should be open to new frames of thinking? Should we strike now while the iron is hot in terms of changing our approach? Is this liminal moment something that we need to be leveraging in order to break into new ways of thinking?
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, I do think it's presented so many things that have changed our world that you would have thought you couldn't do, like spend your time doing kind of online things that you thought had to be in person. So we've been taught a bunch of things. So I think we're in somewhat of a flexible mode. The only thing I would say is if you want to bring about change, it's to be really attentive to how far apart you put the breadcrumbs, right? This is sort of like Hansel and Gretel, which is you need to lead the subconscious on a pathway that doesn't freak it out too much, or you'll get a whole lot of blowback, right? So you can get people to move a long way as long as they can see where the next step is, and the next step, and the next step. This is what I did. As you know, Dorie, I was the dean of a business school for 15 years, and it needed to be turned around. It was in a bit of a crisis point, and it wasn't very good. Everybody would have agreed at the time, and I had a view that I wanted to completely transform it, like have it be virtually unrecognizable at the end of my time as dean versus the beginning. But I had a very conscious strategy, Dorie. It was extremely clear and conscious to me that I would do it in such small increments that nobody would freak out. Students wouldn't freak out. The business, the university administration wouldn't freak out. The business community wouldn't freak out. The professors, the staff, nobody would. And that's what I'd say is, in many respects, the art of leadership. The art of leadership isn't saying, we're going to this exciting new place and everything is going to be different, because you'll freak people out. I think it's better to say, we're going on a journey, and it's going to be a good place, and here's the next step in the journey, and make that next step not scary. Now, if you're on a burning platform, there are times where you're going to have to jump into the water, and it's scary, but it's better than being burned. But that is almost the case that proves the rule. You only want to do that when absolutely necessary. Otherwise, breadcrumb trail. Just ask yourself, like literally, I ask myself the question with all the companies I work with is, how far out can I put the next breadcrumb before I get all sorts of pushback? Often of people not even knowing why they're pushing back. Their subconscious is saying to them, that makes me nervous. Then it's going to take longer, or might not happen at all. So breadcrumb spacing.
We love the breadcrumb strategy. This is terrific. We're here with Roger Martin, author of the book, A New Way to Think. We probably have time for one more question. I want to say hi to wonderful friends joining us from around the world. If you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like and the share button so your friends can benefit. Twanetta is here from Orlando, David from Boston. We have July Rene from Miami. We have Maureen from New Jersey, Diego from Argentina, Connor's tuning in from Vancouver, Sebahattin from Turkey. We have Linda from Chicago, Renee from Costa Rica, Rita Murray from Ireland. We have Attila from Turkey, Raul from Delaware, Pallavi from India, Todd from New York, Victor from West Africa, Annette from SoCal, and many more. We love having every single one of you. And our last question, Roger, comes in from a LinkedIn user. This is a great question. They want to know, how can we inspire our teams to invite more diverse perspectives to high-level meetings and decision-making? How would you advise someone thinking this through?
Well, once again, I think it requires a little bit of a different model. So the implicit model that we've generally been taught is that it is important for you to have a point of view and to have that point of view prevail, right? And it may sound like, oh no, Roger, it's not that. It is. That's what that's what we're taught. That's how we're tested, etc. And so what that sets us up to see implicitly is a point of view that is contrary to ours to be a problem, right? It gets in the way of getting consensus on what I think, right? So what I'd say is the only way we're going to get those diverse voices playing an important role is if you change your model essentially to one that says two things. I have a view worth hearing, but I might be missing something. If you just repeat that to yourself before you go into every meeting. So you can't disappear your thinking, right? That you could say, oh, make sure you have a tabula rasa. I mean, nobody can do that. So you have a point of view, but I might be missing something. And if you say that to yourself, when a diverse point of view comes up, rather than saying, no, you say, well, that's interesting. What did they see? What did she see that I haven't seen? What framework does she have in her head that I haven't had? And what would happen if I would be able to take some of that and integrate it with mine to come up with a better solution? So I better listen really carefully to her and ask a whole bunch of questions. Do you mean this? Do you mean that? Da, 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 da. And lots of people say, yes, but then you'll just get trampled over. No. She'll say to herself, wow, he's really interested in my point of view. Boy, I should be interested in his because he's kind of interesting that he's interested in mine. She'll dredge out of my head a bunch of stuff that she didn't know, right? Because she comes from a different point of view. Then we've got both of those things out on the table. And then I think of it like Lego, right? We say, how could we build those Lego pieces to make a better tower or better plane or whatever the heck it is than we had before? So it's that question or that mindset. I have a view worth hearing, but I might be missing something.
Love that reframe. We have been here with Roger Martin. His new book is called A New Way to Think. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and a special thanks to you, Roger. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Dorie. I would do this anytime.
Thank you so much. We'll see everyone next week. Take care.